Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic that I think a lot of you are really interested in based on what you've told us. We're going to be talking about autism, specifically the unique ways it presents in women. And we're going to be kicking off this deep dive with a pretty startling statistic. For every girl diagnosed with autism, 4 boys are diagnosed.
Wow, 4 to 1.
Yeah, 4 to 1. That's a huge gap.
Huge, yeah.
So that obviously raises a ton of questions. We're going to be diving deep into this article from Cheapaba called Understanding Autism in Women, Bridging the Gender Gap. And our big mission here is to figure out, is this a matter of just like biology at play?
Right.
Or are we missing something really fundamental in the way we diagnose autism, especially when it comes to women?
Well, you hit on such a key point right there, right off the bat.
Yeah.
If you think about how historically autism research has been so heavily focused on males,
Mm-hmm.
it stands to reason that the diagnostic criteria that we're still using today might be kind of based on these really outwardly obvious behaviors that we often see in boys.
So we're talking about a potential diagnostic bias almost. Like the tools that we're using are like calibrated for one group, and then we're kind of scratching our heads as to why they're not picking up on like the nuances in another group.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where this article that we're looking at gets really, really interesting. It suggests that girls might be better at camouflaging autism or that their symptoms are they're subtler, they're harder to spot if you don't know what you're looking for. And that obviously can lead to later diagnoses, sometimes even misdiagnoses altogether.
Wow.
And that's that's denying women access to the support that they need, oftentimes when they need it most.
It's almost like they're trying to navigate a world that wasn't quite built for them using a map that's missing, like key details or something.
That's such a great way to put it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this camouflaging that the article talks about.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a conscious choice, right?
Right.
It's more like girls with autism might actually develop these coping mechanisms to help them fit in socially, even if it means kind of constantly masking who they are.
Okay, now that's something I never even really considered, these coping mechanisms. Like,
Yeah.
what does that actually look like in real life?
Yeah, so the article gives a really interesting example. It talks about social echolalia. So basically, girls might repeat phrases or behaviors that they've observed to appear more neurotypical.
Oh, wow.
Right. So can you imagine the mental effort that takes to constantly be observing and mimicking just to navigate these basic everyday interactions?
That sounds exhausting.
It can be, and that constant pressure to camouflage, to kind of suppress their true selves, it can really take a toll. In fact, the article even suggests that women with autism might face higher rates of anxiety and depression because of it.
Wow. Okay, that really puts a whole new perspective on things. So it's not just about recognizing like the signs of autism itself. It's also understanding the lengths that some women might go to in order to mask those very signs.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to really dig deeper and understand the specific ways that autism can manifest differently in women.
So we're talking about subtle signs, we're talking about coping mechanisms, we're talking about the potential for misdiagnosis, and it really feels like we're kind of uncovering this whole other layer of complexity when it comes to like autism in women.
Absolutely. And I think, that's why awareness is just so crucial here.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we talk about, misdiagnoses, we're not just talking about labels.
Right.
We're talking about women potentially missing out on years of support that could make a world of difference in their lives.
And if these signs are more subtle, if they're easier to miss, where do we even begin to look? What are some specific things that might point to autism in women?
Well, the article does a good job, I think, of laying out a few key areas to kind of pay attention to.
Okay.
So, for example, it talks about difficulties with conversations.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily mean an inability to communicate, but
Right.
Maybe struggling to initiate or maintain a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to things like small talk.
Oh, yeah. You know how some people just small talk is their thing, and then other people, it's they just find it so draining. I'm already starting to see how easily that could be missed or just misinterpreted or something.
Exactly. And kind of along those lines, the article also points to challenges with kind of picking up on social cues.
Okay.
That unspoken language that can be so tricky to navigate.
Oh, 100%. Knowing when someone's hinting at something or understanding body language without overthinking. It's almost like there's this whole like extra layer of communication happening that can be like really exhausting to constantly be like trying to decipher.
And for someone with autism, especially, women who are often, kind of encouraged and expected to be,
Yeah.
so socially adept,
Right.
that constant deciphering can be incredibly taxing.
Totally. It makes you wonder too, like, could that be part of why some women with autism might like prefer solitude or maybe like feel uncomfortable with like physical touch? Because the article mentioned that as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, it did. And it's important to remember, like, those preferences aren't about, being antisocial or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
It's more about like needing to regulate sensory input and kind of conserve energy in a world that can feel really overwhelming at times.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any other like signs that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so the article also highlights things like, um, fixations on specific topics
Okay.
and potential, difficulties with kind of expressing emotions openly.
So someone who's like, really deeply passionate about a particular subject,
Yeah,
that might actually be them like demonstrating a core aspect of their autism.
exactly. Yeah,
That's fascinating.
it is. It is. And then on the emotional expression front, it's not that women with autism don't experience emotions. Of course,
Right.
it's more that they might express them differently or
Hmm.
struggle with those outward displays that society so often expects.
And of course, we can't forget about sensory sensitivities.
Right.
Like that's something that I think a lot of people, kind of associate with autism.
Mhm.
But, it's probably a lot more nuanced than just like someone who finds like loud noises annoying, right?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Sensory sensitivities are incredibly unique to each individual. It,
Mm.
it could be certain textures, smells, lights, sounds, even just the way clothing feels on their skin.
Wow.
And for women, those sensitivities might be, kind of brushed aside or just completely misinterpreted.
Yeah, instead of being seen as like potential signs of autism, it's just like, oh, they're just, too picky or they're overly sensitive.
Exactly, exactly. And that's why, having this knowledge, this deeper understanding of how autism can present in women, it's so crucial because it allows us to look beyond those surface level assumptions and consider other possibilities.
Yeah. It's like being handed a new lens through which we can view like behaviors and experiences that maybe we've like misunderstood in the past.
And with that new lens, we can start to see the bigger picture, right?
Mhm.
The lifelong impact of these misdiagnoses and the importance of early intervention and support.
It's like we've been talking about autism in a whole new light this whole time.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
somebody just like finally like turn the brightness up.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
and hopefully with that greater understanding comes, a greater sense of empathy and support for
Mhm.
for women who've been, navigating a world that hasn't always um, recognized their unique
It
needs.
makes you wonder though if girls and women are so adept at this like social camouflaging, if they've become like experts at blending in, does that mean that some of the like traditional support strategies that we've kind of like relied on in the past might need like a rethink?
That's a really insightful question, and it's definitely something that experts are starting to explore more and more because
Hmm.
if those outward signs aren't always so obvious,
Yeah.
how do we create support systems that are more inclusive and responsive to the needs of those who might be silently struggling?
Yeah, it's like we need to find like new ways to like reach those individuals to create spaces where they feel like seen and understood for who they are, not just for how well they can't like camouflage.
100%, yeah. And
Uh,
I think, part of that involves kind of challenging our own assumptions about what autism, quote unquote, looks like.
right, right.
It's about recognizing the diversity of human experience
Yeah.
and understanding that there's no one size fits all approach to diagnosis or support.
This deep dive has given me, and hopefully everyone who's listening, a lot to like really think about. But I think most importantly, I hope it encourages anyone out there who might be like resonating with some of these nuances. Anyone who like sees themselves in these descriptions or maybe like sees someone they love in these descriptions to reach out, to talk to an autism specialist. Knowledge is power, and I think the more we understand about autism, the better equipped we are to support each other.
Couldn't agree more, yeah. This has been a really insightful conversation, and I really do hope that it inspires your listeners to kind of continue learning and engaging with this incredibly important topic.
And as always, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you in this deep dive? What questions came up for you? Share your thoughts, share your experiences, because learning is an ongoing journey, and every voice, every perspective really does like enrich our understanding. So until next time, keep those brains buzzing and keep exploring the fascinating world around us.